Thanks for inviting me into your home, your long haul truck, RV, camper, taxi, your parents' well appointed basement with the simulated wood paneling, electric fireplace, and the painting of dogs playing poker, your loft, that greasy spoon just off the interstate, and your cabin in the woods. Welcome to Coast AM, the very best in late night talk radio. I'm Richard Serrett, sitting in for George Norrie. And tonight, this morning, we are coming to you live from my home studio in Old Thornhill, just north of Toronto. Now, I can't remember if I mentioned this the last time I was on Coast, which was last Saturday. The mighty Aphrodite and I bought our son Zach 2 ducks, baby ducks, ducklings. And all summer, Zach was obsessed with ducks. I think because he and his brother North have been binge watching Friends. And who is it? Chandler and Joey, I believe, have a pet duck in their apartment on the TV show. So it's all Zach could talk about. He wanted a duck. And he was flooding us with images of ducks, texting us images of ducks and memes of baby ducks every day, all summer long. So we relented. And the day after we got home from Greece, I drove Zach out to a little town in rural Ontario called Fergus, about 90 minutes from here, to a farm called Feathered Acres. And I bought 2 ducklings, which he named Tipu and Binu, North and Zach's favorite cartoon when they were really young. And Zach got in the back seat with the ducklings, and I have not seen him smile like this since he got his braces off nearly 4 years ago. He was and is in duck heaven. And he keeps them in his bedroom, and they swim in the bathtub, and they're incredibly cute, and they're growing incredibly fast. They gain 6 pounds in just 7 weeks. So one night, Zach came to see his mom, the mighty Aphrodite, and he was really down. Because one of the ducklings, I'm not sure whether it was Binu or Tipu, I can't tell the difference. Anyway, one of the ducklings was sick, really sick, he said. It was having trouble breathing. And Zach said he could hear a noticeable rattle inside the duck's chest. So he went online and he did a lot of research and watched some YouTube videos, and he got really sad because based on his research, he concluded that this little duck had some irreversible bacterial infection in his lungs, or her lungs, which was or is quite common apparently with young ducks. And there was nothing that could be done, and the duck would likely die in a couple of days. He was really upset. So we told Zach, well, it's one of the facts of life. And we told him, just make Tupi or Binu or whichever one it was, make him or her as comfortable as possible and enjoy what time you have left with that little duck. But this didn't seem to console Zach very much. And then suddenly I remembered I had a bottle of colloidal silver under the bathroom sink. I ran in there and I took the bottle into Zach's room and I said, here, try giving the duck some of this. What do we have to lose at this point? And I told him it was colloidal silver and it was supposed to have antibacterial properties. And in fact, I'd used it on a severe burn I had on my hand one time, and it worked incredibly well. My hand didn't even scar. And a friend of the family once reported that she had suffered from asthma for her entire life. And then in her 30s, she took some colloidal silver for a couple of weeks, and just like that, no more asthma, cured. So I'm telling Zachary this, and he's skeptical. He said, that's probably just ordinary water, and you're just saying this to make me feel better. So I showed him the label, and he went online, and he read about colloidal silver. So we put a couple of capfuls of colloidal silver in the duck's water dish, and they both lapped it up. An hour later, we gave the ducks some more. Same thing the next day. Well, that was 3 days ago. And Tipu and Binu, whichever one, is still with us. The rattle in his chest is gone. Now, was that the colloidal silver? I don't know. Did Zach maybe misdiagnose the duckling? Perhaps. But the ducklings are still with us. And I must say, most importantly, Zach is still in duck heaven. He is absolutely in love with those ducks. But you wouldn't believe how much these ducklings poo. He brings them to the breakfast table in the morning before school while I'm trying to enjoy my morning coffee. And these two little yellow puffballs with their oversized orange webbed feet are scampering all over the table, pooping every minute. You wouldn't believe how much poop comes out of those two little ducklings. And apparently now you can get duck diapers on Amazon. So that'll be fun. That is the latest from the Serret Petting Zoo. And if there are any more developments, I'll keep you posted. So it's great to be with you on a Friday night into Saturday morning. I've got something a little different for you in the first half. A remarkable story of courage, betrayal, corruption, and survival. Raymond Hicks was a highly decorated deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department with 15 years of service. And while working undercover in the drug squad, Hicks witnessed and reported massive corruption in his agency. And once again, proving that no good deed ever goes unpunished, Hicks ended up being falsely accused and charged with trafficking 350 kilos of cocaine. He ignored the advice of his court-appointed lawyer and steadfastly refused a plea deal, insisting he'd rather die in prison than confess to a crime he never committed. He would spend 16 and a half months behind bars, waiting for his day in court. His remarkable story is coming up in hours 1 and 2. Hours 3 and 4. What night is this? Exactly, Friday night. That means open lines, where we remain politics and COVID-free. Now, believe me, I'm not afraid of politics or COVID. I have a daily show up here in Toronto on the radio, and I talk politics and COVID every day for 2 hours. But this isn't my show. I'm a guest host, emphasis on guest. And I'm also a Canadian speaking to primarily an American audience. So the last thing you need is some interloper talking to you about politics in your country. Besides, I need a break, and I'm guessing so too do many of you. So let's just enjoy the respite and make those 2 hours our sanctuary. What do you say we get into some high strangeness in hours 3 and 4? And I'll eagerly await your tales of interdimensionals, extraterrestrials, cryptids, shadow people, astral projections, past lives, time travel, strange coincidences, and things that go bump in the night. Coming up next, the remarkable story of former Deputy Raymond Hicks, framed and betrayed by colleagues on the Broward County Sheriff's Department. But he's still standing. Welcome to the Audio Imaginarium. Come on in, weary traveler, hang your cloak in a peg, grab a stool, and come gather round the fire. There are stories to be told, and you are among friends. I'm Richard Serret, and this is Coast to Coast AM. Why don't you stay a while? Raymond Hicks is a highly decorated Broward County Sheriff's deputy with 15 years of service. After witnessing and reporting corruption in his agency, he was falsely charged with trafficking 350 kilos of cocaine and spent 16 and a half months behind bars waiting for his day in court. He fought those charges before a jury who had only to deliberate for 30 minutes before acquitting him of all charges. While a deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department, Mr. Hicks received numerous awards, including Deputy of the Month in April of 1997 and again in July of 1999, and the Gold Cross Award, one of the highest sheriff's office honors, in November of 1999. A decorated and dedicated sheriff's deputy, false accusations derailed Mr. Hicks, his career, and his family. But what happened next formed the foundation of his book, I'm Still Standing. Raymond Hicks, welcome to Coast AM. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Richard. How are you doing? It's a tremendous blessing, and I truly thank God for this opportunity at Coast to Coast AM will afford me an opportunity to even speak about me and my family ordeal that we've gone through for the last 21 years. So I just want to say thank you for the powerful introduction and allowing me an opportunity to express, my feelings and love for you all, for giving me this opportunity to talk about what happened to us. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. My pleasure. I want to begin, though, with kind of your backstory, because before you ever became a deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department, just as a boy, as a young man, you had a really rough go. Can we start tell us a little bit about your upbringing and family life?
Yes. Well, my name is Raymond Hicks, and of course, I was born in Vero Beach, but I grew up in Gifford, Florida, as well as Fort Lauderdale, in poverty. I was raised by my mother. There was always turmoil in my home where there was stabbing, cutting. My mother was shot. My dad went to prison. But I always remember when the cops came to my home around about 8 or 9 years of age, they would pull me aside, after my mom and dad and plunged knives into each other's body, and just to take me away from that scene. And they, basically counseled me, it was like, come here, little man, let me talk to you. And, of course, they began to talk to me about the importance of the gun, the handcuff, the blackjack, which was 2 leather strap with the steel at the end. And I never forgot that, and I said if I didn't play professional football, then I would go into law enforcement. But I grew up in poverty, sir. The area that I grew up in, especially here in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, the place called Franklin Park, Leonard's apartment, where only strong survive. This is the area where if you're not from there, you're definitely not going to walk through there. I come from the gutter, where I used to go to bed sometime with a ketchup sandwich, a mayonnaise sandwich. My mom, she worked 2 jobs. She was a migrant worker, and she also cleaned people's homes and in order to put food on the table and, to pay the bills that she had or whatnot. She did the best that she possibly could. So as a young kid growing up in poverty, I always said that, I hope and pray that I made it, playing professional football so that I would take my mother away from that type of environment, to give her a beautiful home and, just to live the normal life as everyone else has lived. And unfortunately, my football career came to a screeching halt. But, yeah, it was really rough, Mr. Richard, growing up where I came up. And the things that I saw, my family hated cops. My family hated cops with a passion. I remember when I was about maybe between 9 and 13 years of age, they was always fighting with the cops. And I'm like, why are they fighting with the police? The police are good people. And I never forget it. There was a cousin of mine, her name was Christine McBurrows, and they had arrested her and placed her in the back seat of the cruiser. And my family, they grabbed water hose and they was beating on the cops and spraying them with water and everything else, and I'm saying to myself, why are they beating up on the police? The police are good people. But
you were on the path to a career in professional sports, football. I think you played some other sports in college as well. You got to college. I mean, you I guess you struggled a little bit with reading, and you had thanks to the kindness of a teacher who took you aside and helped you learn to read. And there you are on your way to college. What happened? What derailed your potential career in professional sports?
Well, to be honest, as you just mentioned, Mr. Richard, when I was a young kid around about, like I said, about 8 or 9, number one, the majority of my family didn't have a high school diploma education. Out of all my mother, brothers and sisters, other siblings, and my father, there was only one of them that actually got a high school diploma, and that's my mother. And she got hers at 55 years of age with the help of my wife and my oldest daughter. And I never forget it. I couldn't even read or write, sir. But my dad always taught me how to fight. So I've been fighting ever since I was 6 years of age. That's one thing he always taught me how to do. I had a sock'em bock'em, and this was like, it was a ball that stood, it was a ball on a pole, and when you punch it, it would go in different directions. And,
right.
And it got to a point where my father said, you better touch it. I don't care which way it goes, you better touch it with your hand. And I became so efficient with my hands so that no matter which way that ball went, I touched it. So going back to school, I'll never forget it. Miss Kirby, she asked me to read a sentence. And when I got up to read the sentence in front of the class, I struggled with trying to read. And these kids, they started laughing at me. And, of course, when they laughed, I said, okay, you want to laugh? Wait after class. And after class, I went upside their head. Wasn't no talking with me, And she said, you come here. She said, you're very respectful, but every time I turn around, I ask you to read, you get into a fight. So I began to tell Miss Kirby, what was going on in my home.
Yeah, it was pretty rough.
My father had a third grade education. He couldn't read or write, couldn't even spell his own name. My mother, she dropped out in seventh grade. So there's a lot of Raymond Hicks in this world that are coming up, in the hood that we call poverty, sir. And a lot of people don't even know what you go through when you're living in these type of areas. But I truly thank God for Miss Kirby because she began to tutor me. She said, oh, my God. And she began to tutor me. I should come home with D's and F's. And no one ever said anything to me about my grades, And Miss Kirby, as she tutored me, I went from D's and F's to C's and D's to C's and B's to A, B's, and C's. And I finally got myself a scholarship. But I was a great athlete, football, basketball, and also track. I shattered records in track in high school. Basketball, I was a better basketball player than I was in anything. A lot of people don't believe that when they look at me now because I'm a lot bigger than what I was in high school. I was like 185 pounds in high school. And I tell you, I thank God for Miss Kirby, because if it wasn't for her, I probably would have been a statistic just like a lot of these other kids that's coming up in the hood. And sometimes the teachers, they don't have, especially when you're coming up in public schools, you don't have that luxury where you got one-on-one attention. So to be honest with you, Mr. Richard, I truly thank God for her. I wish she could see me today. That same kid that couldn't read or write is the same kid who's the author of a book now. There is no ghostwriter. Right. I wrote it myself, sir. And going to college, I finished high school. And if I just back up for 1 second, Mr. Rich, I remember asking my mom if she can give me $2 because after the basketball games, we stopped at McDonald's, to get food. And I asked my mom if she had a couple of dollars so I could get a hamburger and a Coke. So my mom, she scraped up every nickel quarter down and penny that she could. And didn't even come up to $2. But there was a grocery store called Piggly Wiggly back in the days. And, of course,
right.
It was a brown paper bag. So my mom, she made me 2 peanut butter sandwiches, and she wrapped those sandwiches up in that brown paper bag. And I took it and put it in my book bag that the coach had given me, where you put your uniform in. And when everybody got off the bus, Mr. Richard, I stayed on the bus, And it wasn't until one of the kids that I shared my story with, he went and told the coach, which I wish he had not did that. And so Coach Davenport said, listen, Ray, from this point forth, you get off this bus, I'm going to pay for your dinner. Because I was always taught that if you don't have anything, you don't ask nobody for it. So finally, Mr. Richard, fast forwarding, I earned a scholarship to go. I could have gone to any college that I wanted to go to. I graduated with almost like a 2.5, close, I think it was either 2.5 or 2.8, sir. And that was enough to get me in college. But I was a great athlete, and I could have gone probably to any college that I wanted to go to, and I chose to go to Missouri because I wanted to get away from Florida,
Right. Listen, Raymond, excuse the interruption, but I've got to take a time out here because we're going to take a break as we go into the bottom of the hour. We'll come back and continue to discuss your remarkable story, one of courage that involves betrayal, corruption, and ultimately triumph. Raymond Hicks, former deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department and the author of I'm Still Standing on Coast to Coast AM. Sitting in for George Norrie, say hello on Twitter. Or X, I guess. I can't get used to that. At Richard Serrett, S-Y, because I love you, R-E-T-T, the flirtations. Nothing but a heartache. A lot of heartache and teardrops for my guest, Raymond Hicks, former deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department in Florida, and we'll get back to his story of betrayal and corruption and ultimately triumph. And his book, of course, I'm Still Standing. Deep sea explorers reportedly found a curious object they couldn't identify off the coast of southern Alaska during their exploration of an extinct volcano. What they discovered at a depth of about 2 miles looked like a shiny golden egg or orb, and it had an inexplicable hole in it. The researchers were puzzled by the flesh-like orb and even compared it to something out of an X-Files episode or the beginning of a horror movie. They decided to suction up a sample of the orb using a remotely operated arm. The team speculated it could be an egg casing, or part of a sponge. When our collective knowledge can't identify it, it's something weird, one of the researchers remarked. You can see the pictures and check out the rest of the story in the carousel up at coasttocoastam.com. Back to more of my story, my conversation with Raymond Hicks when Coast to Coast AM continues right after these. Raymond Hicks is with us, highly decorated Broward County Sheriff's deputy, falsely accused, imprisoned by corrupt colleagues with the Broward County Sheriff's Department, and he is the author of I'm Still Standing. It's a remarkable story. And as we discussed earlier, Raymond, you had a very difficult upbringing, but you managed to rise above your circumstances. You end up going to college on a scholarship. You had perhaps a professional career in football ahead of you. And just because time is tight, I just want to kind of jump ahead. And if I'm remembering correctly from the book, essentially you gave up a career in football and so forth because you fell in love and you wanted to get married and start a family. Is that about it?
Yes, sir. That's correct. I left college going into my junior year, which I was actually nominated as an All-American. And the wife that I'm still married to this day, I came in contact with her, and she was on a delayed entry program to go into the Navy. And, of course, my sophomore year, my freshman year, which was her sophomore year, she went into the Navy, and the Navy gave her order to go to Scotland. And, of course, we were young and loved, and I just, felt like it was time, for me to give up my college career because they gave her orders to go to Scotland. So when they gave her orders to go to Scotland, that's when her and I decided that we were going to try and conceive a child to keep her from going to Scotland. And that's when my coach came to me, Coach Evans, and he says, Ray, why would you leave school, man? Again, I had no one to really sit down and talk to me and tell me about something that I always wanted to do, which was to become a professional football player. And I scored every game. My freshman year, I was runner for Rookie of the Year award. My sophomore year, I broke all the rushing records. And going into my junior year, I became an All-American. They called a Master Chief and everybody else. And, of course, the Navy says once they give you orders, you got to proceed forward with the orders. And that's when she came back to the university where I was, Missouri Southern State University in Joplin, Missouri. And her and I, we worked on trying to conceive a child. When she went back to the Navy, after 2 weeks, being in Missouri, she called me back a few months later and said that she was pregnant. And that's when I made a decision that I was going to leave college. And she was stationed in Pascagoula, Mississippi, which I left school, and then that's where I went. And
so more than a career in football, you wanted your own loving, stable family.
That is correct. Because I always said that, if I had a family, I want to take care of my family. I want to be a father. I want to be a husband, and and do the things that I know that my father wasn't able to do for me and my other siblings and my mother. And of course, I made a promise to God that I would do the right thing by my family. And of course,
So, I just
God
want to
bless.
jump ahead. Right. God bless you with a family.
Yes.
I just want to jump ahead, Raymond, because I want to get as much of this remarkable story in as I can. You
Okay.
end up back in Florida where you grew up, and you enrolled in a program where you were able to work inside prisons.
That is correct.
Is that
In November 17, 1986, I actually got on with the Broward Sheriff office as a detention officer. And while I was working there as a detention officer, sir, I was highly decorated, Mr. Richard. I was the Gold Cross recipient. I was a Silver Cross recipient. I was two-time deputy of the month. I mean, I've gone in a situation that most people would cringe, if they worked in law enforcement. And around 1990, to fast forward, in 1990, I was pulled out of the jail, and they used me to work sting operations, and this is the time that the Broward Sheriff Office was manufacturing their own drugs and given to us to be sold in the street, which is entrapment. They was actually cooking the drugs up over at the courthouse on the 7th floor, and and there I am out there selling drugs. I mean, I come from the hood. I know the street lingo. A lot of people when you put them out there in the streets, you need to know what you're doing, because if you don't, it can literally cost your life, not only your life, but everybody else around you, their lives. So by me growing up in the hood, and me selling drugs, I had 3 goals in my mouth, because that's what a lot of drug dealers, they do. They have goals in their mouth, and of course, they know the street lingo. Yo, my nigga, what's happening, man? I got these parlays. Parlays meaning that they got these cocaine rocks that's the size of your thumb, and that's what these people are looking for, who are actually purchasing drugs, because that's what the drug dealers are selling. So, so I was working with Drug Task Force OCD, which is organized crime in the cradle within 1,000 feet of a school, was 3 years in the state penitentiary. And that's when they drugged me out of the jail to go out and work on the streets. So I did that for quite some time, and eventually they asked me to go through special training, which I went through the Fort McCullum Drill Sergeant School in order for me to become a drill instructor in 1994. And while I was there, I began to inspire young youth and help them, change their lives around.
So, in other words, as a drill sergeant, it was kind of a boot camp. The judge could send a young offender, let's say, to you rather than to prison, and hopefully that you had the training, you could straighten them out, and they could avoid a prison term. Is that the idea?
Yes, sir. That's correct. So the judge will sentence them to a 90 days regiment training and boot camp, and they stem from 15 years of age to 35. And upon successful completion of the boot camp program, then they were allowed to go back out on the streets. If they didn't complete the program, then there's the judge have the opportunity to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and sentence you to prison. So, of course, that 90-day regiment training was very intense. It was even hard for me, so it was hard for them. I gave them nothing. I was really hard on them, but they knew that I loved them. And you won't believe this, Mr. Richard, but since I've been speaking, sir, on the last couple months, I've had inmates who actually come through the system that reached out to me via messenger and say, no, Deputy Hicks, man, I changed my life around because of you. And I'm not just talking about black individuals, minority. I'm talking about Caucasian, Hispanics, as well as blacks. And I truly thank God for who I am and what I try to do, just to let them know that I didn't want to become a product of my environment, but I wanted my environment to become a product of who I am and to inspire people to say, man, it doesn't make a difference where you come from. It's where you go at in life.
So after you finished your a period of time working as a drill sergeant at this boot camp, you start working full time with Broward County Sheriff's Department on the drug squad again.
That's correct. In 1996, I went through the crossover academy from correction to law enforcement. And, of course, they began, I think it was around about 1998 and 99, they began to use me for sting operations. And there I am out there, again, I'm selling drugs and everything else, but I watched my colleagues do things that was morally wrong and totally unethical, where they was planting drugs on black offenders and they were beating them to the ground, and they were taking money from them. And, we used to do what you could call a buy bust. and we should take informants, and we would send them in a certain particular location. The money was always the zip-lock package that we gave them. They had a serial number, and the money was always marked. So, of course, we would give it to this informant. That person would go into a certain particular location, make transactions with the subjects, and come back and give us the intel. And once they give us intel, we will move in, and we will proceed to arrest those individuals. And, again, like I said, I watch my colleagues leave, each night with thousands of dollars along with drugs. And I'm like, you guys are no different than the ones that we just arrested. You should be placed in the paddy wagon yourself. You guys are crooks, man.
So your colleagues were stealing the drugs, taking the drugs home, selling it themselves? Or using?
They was keeping the drugs, because a lot of times what a lot of cops do, is that first of all that the drugs and money that you collect, Mr. Richard, has to go into a manila folder, and it says evidence. And you take red tape and you place it over that folder, and you put a signature. And that folder cannot be broken. That's with that red tape, because if you do, then you tamper with the evidence. But these individuals keeping it. That's why you see some of these cases where you have law enforcement who plant drugs on subjects when they take them into custody, and the person is actually, hey, what do you mean? Oh, look what I got here. No, I didn't have that, because they done took it and planted on this person, and this is the type of stuff that it's unwarranted in law enforcement. To this day, Mr. Richard, I still love law enforcement, in spite of what you're going to hear me talk about tonight, sir. This morning, sir.
Were your colleagues encouraging you to also participate and skim some money off the top? It's like, hey, Raymond, it's free money. Help, fill your boots.
Yeah, it's like, if you see, the thing about it is that there's a code of silence in law enforcement, sir. And if you go against the grain, it could be detrimental to you, your family, and everybody else. Yeah, they were trying to entice me to take money and drugs, and I told them, no, I'm not going to do that. I didn't sign up for this, man.
How much could you have taken home? How much could you have taken home each night if you'd been a crooked cop?
Oh, you're talking thousands of dollars. You $10,000, $20,000, $100,000. It depends on the amount of drugs that you're selling. You got to. If you talk about a kilogram of coke, that's almost $25,000 for one key, if not $30,000.
And what percentage of your colleagues on the drug squad with Broward County were doing this? Some of them, all of them?
At least 70% of them. Now, you ain't got to take my word. Go to Google and type in Broward Sheriff's deputy get arrested for drug charges, and you'll see for yourself, Mr. Richard.
So you decided to blow the whistle, pull like a Serpico, right? And go to your superiors and tell them what was going on, expecting, that they would be appreciative of this.
Yes, I went to the sergeant, which is what I'm told to do. I went to the sergeant. I said, "Listen, Sergeant, look what these guys doing, man." He told me, mind my business. I said, "What do you mean, mind my business?" So I took it to the lieutenant. And the lieutenant said, "Well, did you talk to your sergeant?" I said, "Yes, I spoke to my sergeant." And he said, "Well, why are you in my office?" What do you mean? I'm like, "What do you mean? Why am I? What? So you guys are telling me that it's okay for these officers to do the stuff that they're doing, and yet still, but we're supposed to be enforcing the law. We're the one who set the tone and the precedent for the people. It's the tax money, it's the taxpayers' money that keeps us with a job, and this is the type of nonsense that you guys telling me about." I said, "Man, I don't get on like that, man. Listen, Mr. Richard, my whole family been in and out of prisons and jails, man. I'm talking about 85% of my family members. So I grew up around it. And to be honest with you, it's not me. I never took a drink in my life. I never even tried a marijuana cigarette in my entire life. And that's the God honest truth."
So what do you do when you realize suddenly that everybody's crooked? What do you do?
Well, what they told me is that, listen, you can't work out here. I said, "I don't give a flying you know what. We're going to put you back in the jail." And what? That's where I started from. And, of course,
working in corrections, not put you personally in jail, but put you back to work in corrections.
Back in detention, yes, sir. We call it detention because I was working with the county. There's a difference between a correctional officer and a detention officer. to me. A detention officer is a person who works for the county. A correctional officer is an individual that works for the state.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
State prison. So, of course, they put me back in the jail. I said, okay, I'll go back. I'll go back and work in the jail. That's fine with me. And next thing you know, I go back and I'm working. I'm working on the 6th floor. I come home. This is on June 15, 2000. And I decided to take a shower. I lie down, because I worked from 7 to 3. And I took a couple hour nap. I got up around about 5:30. I went to go work out in my backyard. I had over about 600-some pounds in my backyard. And my neighbor and I, we went to go work out. And I look across the street. Next thing you know, there's a drug task. I say, man, that's the drug task force of the SWAT team. So when they saw me, they all jumped in their car, Mr. Richard, and they sped down the back street. So I told my neighbor, I said, man, let's go to the front of my yard and see what's going on. So when I get to the front of my yard, I'm 60 cops stormed my home. They done jumped my wall and everything. Had me and my kids at gunpoint. My
60? They're pointing a gun at your children.
60-something cops. And I'm not even exaggerating. So my daughter was my oldest daughter was 12. My youngest daughter was 7. And my wife had gone to Winn-Dixie. And so my oldest daughter must have got on the phone and called her and said, Mommy, they got Daddy here at the house, the police. They done going in my house and tearing up my house and everything, pretending like they looking for drugs. And here come this black guy named Ricky Clark. He come patting me at my shoulder telling me, Ray, just calm down. Calm down. I said, man, what you mean, Ricky, calm down? What the freak you mean? I said, what do you guys here for? Are you Ray Hicks? I said, you guys know I'm Ray Hicks. We got a warrant for your arrest. I said, a warrant for who arrest? We got a warrant for you. I said, man, okay, what did I do? So then all of a sudden, Dave Robshaw from Internal Affairs, he come to me and says, Ray, listen, we're gonna place you on suspension pending the outcome of this case. I said, what case? So
Raymond,
they never told me, Mr. Richard, what they was arresting me for. Because
Raymond, I got to jump in here again because we're approaching the top of the hour. We'll pick up on this story on the other side. Raymond Hicks, highly decorated deputy with the Broward County Sheriff Department, railroaded, framed by his corrupt colleagues. He's the author of I'm Still Standing, Coast to Coast AM.